Throughout this afternoon, we'll be taking you to church. In the spirit of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a fellow Morehouse man, Pastor Mike Walrond, will take up the word agency. He begins with governmental agency.
In that hot summer of 1776, the founding fathers of this country penned words that set the bar for democracy around the world. With those powerful words that often go recited, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In that same year, an English abolitionist by the name of Thomas Day wrote something that almost pierced to the core the writers of that document. Thomas Day said, and I quote, "If there be an object truly ridiculous in nature, it is an American patriot, signing resolutions of independency with one hand and with the other brandishing a whip over his affrighted slaves." What they could not fully grasp was the glaring hypocrisy and radical inconsistency of that document. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and while they proclaim all men, there were some clear exceptions. Not slaves, not those sun-kissed, not the sons and daughters from Africa. From the very outset, African Americans were not included in that document. It is, in the words of the late, great Gardner Taylor, it is as if racism was the coiled serpent under the table on which the Constitution was written. Hoping in some way, shape, or form that that document would really, truly give way to freedom, justice, and equality. Listen to the words that set the tone for our country. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which means that those rights are unable to be taken away or given away by anyone. And then this idea of the consent of the governed is the power by which the government leads and rules. But think about it. If government rules by consent of the governed, and the consent of the governed are the people upon which this Constitution was based, then there's a question that has to be asked: whose consent to govern? Because if there's a segment of the population that is viewed as subhuman, it means that they were not human enough to give consent, which means that African Americans now are operating under a document then, and in many respects even now, that did not work then for them because they were not human enough to give consent. And the real question is, even today, the real challenge is today, can that document begin to truly work for all Americans? Not just white, all, not just black, all, and become devoid of its glaring hypocrisies. There is much work to do. And for those who believe that somehow the presence of an African-American couple in the White House means that we are in a post-racial era, you are living an illusion. The glaring realities, the tragic events of the past several years have shown us that our country has a long way to go to overcome its trouble with our racialized history. When there are so many who are yearning to breathe free, when there are so many who are seeking to live with the basic necessities of life in this country that claims to be at the forefront of freedom and democracy and equality and justice, Dr. King was right. At some point, we have to help this government be true to the check it promised. Because we are weary, as Dr. King said, of that check returning insufficient funds. I'll close with this because they did tell me I had 4 minutes. If we are truly going to be the nation that we ought to be, we must take seriously those words that stand in the New York Harbor. There is a lady there that we call Lady Liberty. But before she was called Lady Liberty, she was called the mother of exiles. And when Emma Lazarus wrote that poem, she placed it there on the bottom of that statue. Send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. If we are not going to make a mockery of those words, and if we are going to be true to the words of that declaration, then our government must seek to uphold the rights of all of its citizens and not dismantle hard-fought laws in our current day.